All right, today we're going to talk about something that's quietly running in the background of your mind right now. It's a critical, invisible bug in our mental software, and it's creating massive hidden risks for you, for your business, for everything. It's a piece of outdated code that most of us don't even know is there. So yeah, let's dive in.
And here it is. This is the core idea, geographic blindness. And no, this has nothing to do with being bad with maps. It's a fundamental flaw in how we see the world, and it could be costing you, literally, everything. It's a really urgent problem to solve.
So let's really dig in and diagnose this bug, shall we? It's a deep-seated biological assumption. A piece of old programming that unconsciously tethers your entire life, your wealth, your definition of success, to a single piece of land, to one government, to one system.
So what does that actually mean in plain English? Well, it means we grow up with this baked-in assumption that the rules of the game where we live, our laws, our economy, are universal. We mistake them for the unchangeable laws of physics, like gravity or something. But here's the thing, they're not even close.
Okay, so this really boils down to two completely different ways of seeing the world. On one side, you've got the locally optimized mind. This is the default setting for pretty much everyone, even really successful people. They build their whole world in one place, assuming it'll be stable forever. But then you have the unordinary mind. And this mind sees that local approach as a total, catastrophic failure. They get that the world is going through a massive systemic reset right now, moving to a multipolar network. And in that new world, being tied to just one spot, well, that's the definition of fragile.
So let's get into the real-world consequences here, because this isn't just some abstract idea. We're talking about a ticking time bomb, a structural collapse just waiting to happen. We're going to deconstruct what's known as the single nation failure point.
I mean, just look at this number, 100%. Think about that for a second. For so many high achievers, everything, their home, their investments, their company, their family's safety, is all tied to the fate of one single government. That is zero backup, zero redundancy. It's an insane amount of risk all packed into one tiny box. And there's a name for this condition, jurisdictional fragility. Kind of makes that vague risk feel a lot more real, doesn't it? It means you're not really just a citizen. You're basically a hostage to your government's spending habits, who it decides to make friends or enemies with. You're a hostage to its sheer luck on the world stage. And believe me, this fragility has symptoms. See if any of this sounds familiar to you. That constant low-level anxiety you get from doom scrolling the news, that's macro anxiety. How about wasting all your brain power, your best strategic thinking, on politics and tax changes you have absolutely no control over? That's strategic paralysis. You end up as a victim of what's called spatial entropy, just passively watching your one system slowly decay around you. This quote just nails it, doesn't it? It's like you're on this massive ship, but instead of checking for holes in the hull, you've spent your whole life just polishing the silverware. We get so obsessed with the small stuff, our careers, our local investments, while the entire ship could be sinking. We are focusing on completely the wrong thing. Okay, so we found the bug. We know the symptoms. Now what? Well, now it's time for the upgrade. It's time to install a new operating system for your brain, the Geopolitical OS. This is how you go from being a victim to being an architect. And the core principle of this whole new OS is something called jurisdictional arbitrage. It's a total mind flip. It's about stopping seeing the world as a cage and starting to see it as a menu of services where you get to pick and choose the absolute best option for every single part of your life. And here's what that actually looks like in the real world. Think about it like unbundling your life, right? You wouldn't get your email, your spreadsheets, and your video editing software all from one tiny company. So why on earth would you get all your life services from just one government? You can use a place like Switzerland or Singapore for protecting your wealth, maybe design your ideal lifestyle in Portugal, and then tap into the powerhouse economies of the US or the UAE to grow your business. You're strategically choosing the best tool for each job. You see, this is the huge shift we're talking about. You go from just living in a place, totally dependent on one nation, to operating across a network. It's about moving from compliance to optionality. You stop being a passive resident and you become the active architect of your own life. Okay, I know what you're thinking. This all sounds great, but how do I actually do it? Fair enough. Let's get practical. Let's turn this big theory into a concrete, step-by-step protocol you can actually start using. It really boils down to three main steps. Step 1. You've got to do a jurisdictional audit. Seriously, map out your dependency score, where your assets, your income, your home, find your riskiest spots. Step 2, decouple. This is where you get into things like flag theory, the idea of planting different flags for different parts of your life in different countries. And you can start simple by separating your digital and financial assets from where you physically are. And step 3, secure your physical optionality. And I mean a real, honest-to-goodness plan B, a second residency, a physical place you can actually go if things get weird.
I love this metaphor because it is so true for our times. If your entire life, your whole empire is built like some little local app, well, it's just not going to survive when the global server reboots. And make no mistake, that server is rebooting as we speak.
So really, this is the ultimate takeaway. We've all been taught to think of ourselves as citizens, as patriots. And that can be, well, it can be limiting. In this day and age, you have to start thinking like an architect. That's where the real power is. You're not just playing the game. You are designing the entire board.
So I'll just leave you with this one question to think about. In this new era, in this changing world, which one are you going to be? Are you going to be a citizen, subject to the whims of a single system? Or are you going to be an architect of your own sovereign life? The choice really is yours.
Welcome to The Explainer. What if I told you the single biggest risk to your success isn't in your stock portfolio or your career, but it's actually printed on your passport? Today, we're breaking down a new mental model, a new way of thinking that totally transforms your relationship with geography, taking you from a passive local player to a strategic global architect.
So let's just dive right in with a question that might make you a little uncomfortable. Seriously, think about it for a second. Your assets, your income, your physical safety. Is all of it, every last bit, tied to the good fortune and policies of just one single country? For most of us, the answer is a resounding yes. And that exposes a huge and honestly mostly invisible risk.
All right, so let's start by figuring out the root of this problem. Why do we even think this way? Well, it's basically a fundamental bug in our mental software, a kind of biological lag that keeps our minds stuck to one piece of land in a world that is becoming more global and digital by the second. And here it is. We call it geographic blindness. It's this deep, unconscious assumption that the system you were born into, well, that its rules are like the laws of physics, permanent, unchangeable, and universal. But in an age of crazy fast global change, this isn't just a minor blind spot. It's a critical failure in how we think about our own lives.
This right here really shows the core mindset shift we're talking about. On the left, you've got the default setting, locally optimized. You live in a place. You're dependent on one nation. You're basically like a local app that only works on one phone. But on the right, you become an architect of geography. You operate across a network. Your life runs like a global operating system. This isn't just about moving. It's a fundamental upgrade to your personal strategy.
So how does this geographic blindness bug actually create a massive structural vulnerability in your life? This is where the theory gets very, very real, and it's something anyone serious about high performance needs to understand. And this brings us right to the heart of the issue, the single nation failure point. You know, in systems thinking, probably the most basic rule for survival is redundancy. You always have a backup. And yet, look at this. Most high performers have 100% of their assets, 100% of their income, and 100% of their physical presence tied to a single political entity. That is not diversification. That's what you call jurisdictional fragility. And the consequences of being this fragile are pretty severe. It creates macro anxiety. You know that feeling where your mind is constantly hijacked by news cycles, by tax changes, by political drama you can't influence. This leads to what's called strategic paralysis. You end up wasting your most valuable asset, your brain power, worrying about things you literally cannot control. You're trying to build this robust, anti-fragile life, but you're doing it on a fundamentally fragile foundation. You become a passenger, not the pilot. This quote just captures the danger perfectly. Are you spending all your time and energy polishing the silverware, your career, your investments, making everything look perfect, while you're completely ignoring the structural integrity of the ship you're on? That right there is the essence of the single nation failure point.
Okay, we've clearly identified the problem and its pretty scary consequences. So now let's pivot. Let's talk about how to go from being a local victim to a global architect. This requires a powerful new mindset, a whole new layer in your strategic thinking.
And this is the paradigm shift. It's called jurisdictional arbitrage. It's the conscious decision to stop seeing the world as a cage of constraints you were born into and instead see it as a menu of services. Different countries offer different benefits, and the strategic architect learns how to pick and choose from that menu to build a much more resilient and optimized life. So, how does this actually work in practice? Well, instead of getting everything from one provider, you unbundle it. You might use one jurisdiction for its safe haven banking, another for its amazing quality of life, a third for a favorable tax environment for your business, and, hey, maybe a fourth for its strong digital privacy laws. You're aligning your specific needs with the best service provider on a global scale.
And the ultimate goal here, what this all boils down to, is engineering a life where you have choices. You move from a state of just complying with a single system you never chose to a state of optionality. You have a plan B, you have a plan C, you have the freedom to navigate global shifts instead of just being crushed by them.
All right, so this all sounds great in theory, right? But how do you actually do it? How do you install this new geopolitical OS? Let's break down the first few steps you can take.
Here's a simple, actionable framework. First, you do a jurisdictional audit. You literally map out exactly how dependent you are on one country. Second, you start to decouple the key parts of your life. This is often called flag theory, where you strategically plant flags for things like citizenship, residency, your business, and your assets in different countries. The easiest place to start? Your digital and financial life. And third, you secure physical optionality by establishing a true Plan B location.
And we'll leave you with this final thought. Look, this isn't about abandoning your identity or where you're from. It's about upgrading it. It's a call to take radical ownership of your life structure, to move beyond being a passive participant in one system and to become the active architect of your own global destiny.
All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going to talk about architecting your geopolitical OS. It's a whole new mental model for how to operate in a world that's, well, it's changing fast. We're going to explore how you can move beyond the limits of just one country and start building a life system that's truly global, one that turns national borders into a menu of options. So let me start by asking you a question, a pretty direct one. Think about your life's entire operating system, your job, your money, where you physically live. Is it all built on the assumption that the world we grew up in is going to be the world of tomorrow? We're about to seriously challenge that core idea. You see, at the heart of this outdated OS, there's a critical bug. It's this invisible constraint that, honestly, most of us never even realize is there. We're calling it geographic blindness. And just seeing it is the first crucial step toward a major system upgrade. So what exactly is this bug? Well, geographic blindness is basically the default setting we're all born with. It's this deep, almost biological assumption that the stability, the laws, the opportunities of whatever country you call home are permanent and universal. This programming makes us all locally optimized, meaning we build our entire lives on what's really just a single plot of land on a very big map. And here's the kicker. While we're all busy operating locally, the world itself is going through this massive systemic reset. It's shifting away from a unipolar model, one dominant power, to a multipolar network with many different nodes of influence. In this new world, being optimized for just one of those nodes isn't just a missed opportunity, it's an incredibly fragile way to live. This right here perfectly illustrates the mental leap we have to make. The old mindset, it's about living in a place. It's about being dependent on one nation, and your identity is pretty much just citizen. But the new mindset, that's about operating across a network. It's using global arbitrage and stepping into a totally new role, an architect of geography, someone who actively designs their place in the world. Okay, so we've identified the bug in the system. Now let's really look at the kind of crash it can cause. This brings us to a really serious concept, the danger of jurisdictional fragility. For most of us, especially high performers, this chart is probably a little too real. 100% of your assets, 100% of your income, and 100% of your physical time all tied up in a single country. In systems thinking, that's not diversification. That is a single point of failure. You're putting all of your eggs in one single geopolitical basket. And here's the hard truth. When your entire life is concentrated in one place, you're not really in control. You are, as the source material so bluntly puts it, simply a hostage to a single government's fiscal policy and geopolitical luck. You're basically a passenger on a ship you don't pilot. And the consequences of this are huge. It creates macro anxiety, that constant low-level hum of stress you get from watching the news and worrying about what politicians are going to do next. It leads to strategic paralysis, where all your best thinking, your cognitive energy, gets wasted on stuff you can't even control. And of course, when that one country takes a hit, your entire system goes down with it. You become a victim of what's called spatial entropy. Your world actually shrinks as the chaos outside just grows. Okay, so we've diagnosed the problem pretty clearly. Now, let's talk about the solution. And it all starts with a complete reframing. You have to stop seeing the world as a cage of constraints and start seeing it as a menu of services. This is the heart of what's known as jurisdictional arbitrage. This is what it looks like in the real world. You start treating the world like a distributed network, where different countries provide different systemic services. So, you might choose a stable, low-tax place for your wealth protection, you might pick a country with an amazing quality of life for your lifestyle design, and you might go to an emerging tech hub for business scalability. The idea is you earn in the strongest currency, you live in the best environment, and you protect your assets in the safest place. You pick and choose.
And the ultimate goal here is something called refactored sovereignty. It sounds fancy, but the idea is actually simple. It's about moving from just passively complying with the rules of the one system you were born into to actively creating optionality for yourself across multiple systems. It's a whole other level of personal freedom, one that's built on strategic choice, not on an accident of birth.
And the payoff for all this work? It's incredible. It's what we call systemic peace. I mean, just imagine freeing up all the mental bandwidth you currently spend worrying about politics, tax changes, and social chaos. When you're no longer a hostage to those things, you achieve this elite level of focus. This is the high-performance psychology of a true global outlier. So this all sounds powerful in theory, right? But the big question is, how do you actually build it? So now we're going to move from the philosophy to the protocol. Let's talk about the sovereignty engine. The protocol really breaks down into 3 clear steps. Number 1, you execute an audit. You map out exactly where your dependencies are to see your real risk exposure. 2, you decouple. You apply what's called the flag theory baseline to methodically separate the key parts of your life. And 3, you secure physical optionality. You establish a genuine, real Plan B location. Let's just dig into that second step for a minute, because it's so important. Flag theory is this idea of planting different flags or legal ties in various countries to optimize your life. So you start decoupling your core components. You could start with digital sovereignty, moving your data to places with really strong privacy laws. Then you build financial sovereignty by diversifying your assets across different currencies and banking systems. The core idea is to systematically, piece by piece, break your dependency on any single political entity. As we start to wrap this up, it's really important to get that this whole process, it's more than just a financial or legal strategy. It's a fundamental shift in your personal identity and your sense of agency in the world. This slide just nails that identity shift. The passenger is a victim, always fighting the tide, just worrying about the one ship they're on. But the architect, they're a master of geography. They navigate with the wind. They don't just have a home, they operate a system. They're not worried about the hull of one ship because they're busy designing the entire fleet. And so, we'll leave you with this final thought. The world order is changing. The whole system is rebooting. The currents are shifting, and the old maps, they're basically useless now. So the only question that really matters is this. Are you going to keep fighting the tide, or are you going to become the architect who learns to navigate with the wind?
Today, we're diving into something big. We're talking about a framework for completely rewriting your geopolitical operating system. It's about upgrading your mental software so you can really thrive in this crazy changing world. Let's get right into it.
All right, let me start by asking you a question. Just think about it for a second. What percentage of your life is tied to a single government? I'm talking about your income, your assets, your home, even where your data is stored. For most people, if we're being honest, that number is dangerously close to 100%. We're going to explore why that's a massive, massive vulnerability and what you can actually do about it.
So why are we all so dependent? Well, it comes from a critical flaw in our thinking, almost like an invisible bug that's running in the background of our minds all the time. It's a concept called geographic blindness.
Now, this isn't just some small bias. The way it's framed here is as a biological assumption. It's like we're hardwired to just believe that the system we were born into is permanent, that it's universal, like gravity. And this bug, this flaw in our neural OS, makes us incredibly vulnerable, because we just completely fail to see the bigger geopolitical picture.
And this metaphor just illustrates the danger so perfectly. You spent your entire life becoming this highly optimized local app. You're perfect for one specific environment, one node in this huge global network. But what happens when that whole network, that global server, is resetting? Well, your highly specialized app, it could crash. You're basically optimized for a game whose rules are changing as you play.
So this geographic blindness, it leads to a massive structural risk in your life, the single nation failure point. And it's a really unsettling idea when you think about it, that your entire life might be built on a foundation that could just crack,
completely without warning. This chart? This is the reality for most of us. 100% dependency. All our assets, all our income, our physical presence, it's all tied to one single jurisdiction. You know, in systems thinking, a lack of redundancy is just another word for fragility. It's an incredibly precarious way to live, and so many of the world's top performers don't even realize they've built their lives on it.
And this brings us to the core problem right here: jurisdictional fragility. It means your whole life system is completely exposed to one country's inflation, its social unrest, or its sudden policy shifts. You might think you're diversified because you own a bunch of different stocks, right? But if they're all held within the same legal system, the same currency system, that diversification is pretty much an illusion.
So let's look at the contrast. On one side, you've got the default setting, this fragile foundation, where you're basically a hostage to policy, and that leads to what's called strategic paralysis. You spend all your best brain power worrying about things you can't control. But on the other side, that's the goal, an anti-fragile life, one that's built on diversification and having options, which creates systemic peace so you can actually focus on what matters.
You know, this quote just nails it. It perfectly captures the problem. We focus so much on optimizing the small stuff right in front of us, our career, our local investments, polishing the silverware, while we completely ignore the huge systemic risks to the entire ship we're sailing on. Okay, so we've diagnosed the problem pretty clearly. Now what? How do we fix it? Well, it all starts with a really profound mindset shift. You have to move from being a passive citizen to being an active strategist, an architect of your own geography. Just look at the difference here. The citizen mindset, it's all about compliance, about being a patriot, and at the end of the day, being a victim of policy changes. But the architect mindset is about creating optionality. It's about seeing the world not as a set of fixed borders, but as a dynamic system that you can strategically navigate. And the core strategy of the architect is something called jurisdictional arbitrage. This is the big idea right here. Instead of feeling confined by the country you happen to be born in, you start to see the world as a menu of services. You can actually pick and choose the best services from different places to suit your specific needs. Think of it like this. The world is a distributed network. One country might offer the absolute best services for protecting your assets. Another one might have the lifestyle you've always dreamed of. A third might be the perfect place to scale your business. The architect doesn't just pick one. The architect builds a personal system that leverages the best of all of them. So how does an architect actually put this theory into practice? Well, the framework for doing this, for implementing this new mindset, is called the Geopolitical Protocol. This is the action plan. And the protocol has 3 very concrete steps. First, you audit your dependency. Figure out where you stand. Second, you decouple your life using a concept called flag theory. And third, you build true optionality by securing a physical plan B. See? This turns a huge, grand strategy into a process you can actually follow. Okay, let's zoom in on that second step, because this is where the rubber meets the road. Flag theory is a framework for structuring your life across multiple places, planting flags where each part of your life is treated best. This means decoupling things. You've got digital sovereignty, moving your data to countries with strong privacy laws. Then there's financial sovereignty, diversifying your assets across different currencies and legal structures. And critically, physical optionality, securing a Plan B location for yourself, a place for your neural OS, just in case your primary home becomes unstable. You see, implementing this protocol is really the first step toward becoming a global outlier. It's about deciding that a single border isn't going to limit the resolution of your mind or your life. It's about building a truly robust, anti-fragile system for yourself and the people you care about. And this is the call to action, isn't it? It's not about abandoning your home country. It's about fundamentally upgrading your perspective, from being a passive resident to an active, intentional designer of your life on a global scale. So we'll end right where we began, with one last question for you to think about. Your mind consumes global information. You connect with people all over the world. Your thinking isn't confined by borders, so why is your life? That's the upgrade worth considering. Thanks for tuning in.